So today, OTT Symposium. Here's a quick view of the agenda. Our Master of Ceremonies today will be John Watts, who'll come up after the first speaker, who I will introduce to you now. That is Jack Davison. He is Executive Vice President at 3Vision, and he will talk about reimagining TV viewing. Jack, can you come to the stage? Thank you, guys. Speak to you later. And there's the clicker.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. We've been asked to come here today to talk, maybe nicely branded as Reimagining TV Viewing, to talk about how shows, how content is being offered to consumers today, how channels are responding to the change that there is in the environment, how SVOD is changing, and what's happening to, I guess, kind of the three key areas that make, let's call it a content project work. How it's going to get to market, who funds it, who buys it, how it's going to be made available to consumers, and how it's going to be windowed to ultimately maximize the revenues and make that project work. But as I always say, I think you need to get high up first to have a look at that, because it's a complex world we live in today. And the framework within which I'm going to do that is with these 6 pillars, all of which I think have, if we could do word counts and buzzwords of last year, we're probably right up there. Certainly the first 5 were right up there in terms of what people were talking about. In some cases, what may be on the hype curve, but where the activity was. Media consolidation takes sort of 2 forms in my mind, but kind of unprecedented amount of consolidation last year, really, with AT&T, Disney, Discovery, and Comcast all closing either the start of this year, March, big month this year, all closing acquisitions, all with different focuses and maybe different rationale, but probably all with the thought that big is better. But then there's not just mergers, there's alliances. There's just 4 here. There's endless alliances we can talk about, and I'm sure there'll be more talked about today. ProSieben's venture in Germany, I think, will be announcing more partners this year. BBC, ITV, obviously a big focus and area of interest for all of us here in the UK. Launched in the US with, I would say, decent success in the sense that they've progressed well in a small market that actually generates quite a lot of cash. But I guess the 2 that are interesting here are Salto in France, which, if you read and listen to what the media, the culture ministry in France says, is a great venture that's going to help the French media fight back against kind of global media. But if you talk to the people at the different companies in France, they pretty much tell you they don't like each other and they don't think it's going to work. I'm not saying it's certainly not the same in the UK, but we know the UK ventures have always had troubles working together. Not so much in the personalities of working together, but there's a lot at play. There's a lot in the ecosystem for those 2 companies, and I wouldn't be the one working out the opportunity cost of what's going on with that venture. And finally, the Japanese one I use as an example because there's some great, strong, powerful media players in that venture. And they're building a really nice proposition, but they're all doing their own thing as well. So it's going to ultimately handicap the possibilities of that venture because they're all continuing to do exactly what they were doing in the first place. Direct to consumer, it's been such a big theme, but in some respects, kind of this has been going on for years. Content owners have been launching channels and services for years, but it's taken a different pace now. With Disney Plus, which we understand, I think it's going to launch next month in the Netherlands, and plenty of others, different types, different scale, different level of venture that will be launching this year and next, and is having a significant impact on the content market. Our feedback kind of last year was more of the short-term challenges of providers who either we're figuring out the challenge of what they're going to do with the hole in their content when these services launch and withhold the content from them, and not necessarily from the impact of the services actually launching, which we're going to see this year. SVOD continues to grow. You could pick any analyst. I've picked one here, but arguably the curve is flattening a bit. But I think what's more interesting, and became even more interesting again this week, is the issue around the aggregation of the SVOD services. Now, obviously, pay TV operators, cable, satellite, IPTV, all of them have a role to play at the moment in terms of aggregating and offering these OTT services to their consumers. It's been happening for some time now. Virgin were the first to launch an integrated kind of, deeply integrated solution with Netflix, but others have done the same now. Sky may be taking it to another level in terms of the way they bundle it and discount it. But there are plenty of players in the market, and you've got kind of pay TV players like Xfinity who I'm slightly confused about Flex. I don't know if those of you who've read about it. It's only just, I think it's launched either today or yesterday, but it's an OTT box of their own, proprietary, based on an Android system. It aggregates all the SVOD players. You get it by paying $5 a month. You could go out to the market and spend between $40 and $60 on any box that would do exactly the same. Here you have to pay regularly $5 a month to rent the box, and which is a big question mark, I guess, for consumers. Plus, Xfinity also have Xfinity Instant, which is another service that they have that's available on Roku boxes and other connected devices. So we'll see how it fits in with their suite of products and what happens. But it is an example of pay TV operators having a look at this role in terms of aggregating services. Amazon Channels is another one. Obviously, they were probably one of the more significant ones, launching as early as really 2016 as the Streaming Partners program. Now, Amazon Channels is up to about 160. See a little bit of a drop-off now. We hear rumors of the technology creaking at the edges and not exactly working perfectly. But we can see the international rollouts have had some growth, although slowing in the UK and Germany. And I think France may be next. So probably people in Europe maybe know this better than me. France may be next. Kind of LATAM, India, all on the horizon. But Amazon believe they have a big play to roll. Roku, another one. Roku, kind of even before everyone was paying attention to Apple's focus on services, what you have to really look at here, the important thing is the blue bit is the hardware. The red bit is the services, is the revenue they get from sharing with third-party services on the platform or the Roku channel, their AVOD platform. So you can kind of see not only where all the growth is, but where all the money is for them. They're getting their money from aggregating services and their AVOD business. And of course, this week, the grand 2-hour keynote. I don't know who of you sat through it. It's a fascinating session, ending with, I'm not kidding, Apple proclaiming Oprah as the new Messiah. You should watch the video. It is just unbelievable. 2 hours, massively stylistic, lacking hugely in substance. A few things, I mean, the kind of credit card details was very interesting, very interesting what they're doing with that. Arcade, quite interesting for those in the gaming business, their subscription gaming service. News Plus, I mean, they did have Texture, and you're probably familiar with News, but News Plus is their subscription news service, which I think is $9.99. And a great deal, I guess, trumpeted about TV Plus with all of the stars and everybody who was there, the elite, but really not much else said. I think the interesting thing is you could probably, maybe you read too much into it, but News Plus is the only product they actually launched, and they actually said, this is how much it's going to cost, this is how you get it. And that is only available if you've got Apple hardware. So all of the interesting stuff about integrating on Amazon Box, being hardware and agnostic, all of that stuff, while important, we don't know yet what they're going to do with the TV Plus SVOD service. But they did show off some of the content, which if you didn't see it, Here you go.
Stand by 3. Stand by 1. Make your move.
7, 6, yeah, I'm ready. 5, 4, 3, 2.
This is where we go learn y'all.
So, rather than the promo, actually, it's probably a bit unfair. That's actually probably their catalogue. But obviously, it's very significant what they're spending on content, what they're going to do. But there's a huge amount of style about it. But I should have put these in two. Just ignore this one for a minute. This is where their revenues come from. And we just look at that quickly. You just do what Wall Street does. You look at the iPhone. And you panic whenever there's a problem in China or iPhone sales are down and it hammers the sales price. And you ignore these little ones around here. But if you take the services revenue out and you put it here, they made $10.5 billion on it at last quarter. I mean, I'm not going to do sort of Austin Powers £1 million things, but that's a lot of money in my terms. And they made $10.5 billion in the quarter, and that's the growth. And that's before all these other things they're announcing and before they're saying they're focusing on service revenue. So kind of they've been doing it already, but now kind of it's well and truly out of the closet. It's a big part of their focus. And we'll see how that goes. So just quick gear change, crunching gear change. The other thing last year, which I think is going to see how that impacts the content market. We'll sort of talk a bit more. AVOD. Without a doubt, if we look at the time, maybe in our work, maybe around here, AVOD was a dirty word. Content people hated it. They used to tell us it was a plague from Russia and China, and they didn't want it to invade their territory. It kind of all started with sort of kind of UGC and a few interesting ones, but obviously Hulu changed to SVOD quite quickly. Russia, Poland. Then, then you've got the channels have got a role to play in this. All the channel player services launching between those 2 years. But then, kind of Voodoo, that wasn't really AVOD. They launched in 2010, but in 2016 they launched AVOD, and then you start seeing kind of these new ventures kind of launching. Then you start seeing Amazon getting involved, Roku getting involved, Roku IPOing and becoming a pretty big business. Social media launching services, Amazon launching free dive through IMDb, our friends at Viacom buying Pluto, Tubi raising some more money. I think kind of Lionsgate and MGM were investors in them. And Sinclair, kind of big local broadcasting company in the US, launching at the start of the year as well. So there's money coming in, there's traditional kind of stronger players coming in, and then there's the channels who are evolving their own services. And they're all chasing what some analysts say is a big growth coming in AVOD. But it is a big challenge. As we're about to get into, we're going to show you about kind of how channels are using the content and how they're growing kind of their digital initiatives. I think if you look at the traditional TV revenues, it does vary in advertising revenues. It does vary by market, but I think it's probably not an oversimplification to say it's pretty flat. It's falling in some markets just slowly, but it's pretty flat. It's not going anywhere, and that's the challenge that the free TV channels have. I think the argument they're sitting on now is we need to get more of the digital advertising revenues. Digital's been growing. We need to get more of those. We need to get those AVOD revenues. But of course, kind of it's the age-old challenge. It's the trading, it's not quite the same, but it's trading kind of analog dollars for digital cents. CPMs in AVOD are entirely different from the CPMs in TV, and they need to figure that out. And they are, and gradually I think we're seeing people working through those challenges. And we'll see, but we'll come back to that when we look at what the channels are doing. The other big word, thanks to Mr. Katzenberg, is short form. The market for short form has had lots of ups and downs. It's obviously dominated and often synonymous with what's been going on with MCMs and YouTube. Now it's more synonymous with what's going on with social media. We've had some big bets and we've had some big crashes. Go90, Verizon service, Vessel before that, Studio Plus, the Vivendi premium short form service that itself shut down last year. But social media need it. And they will be continuing to drive it. There's lots of Facebook commissions going on, Snapchat, lots of activity there. They need to drive these numbers, time spent using. And there is, even though only about 16% of the time, according to that data set, is spent using video, they all appreciate there is massive value in video. And that's why they're trying to figure out, bit by bit, their strategy. And then Mr. Katzenberg comes along, $1 billion. Again, I can be Austin Powers. But, including our friends at Liberty, big list of media investors, 10 investors. I don't know the exact number, but the assumption is they've all invested, give or take a bit, 25 million each. He's raised $1 billion. He's going to launch it, I think, they're kind of expecting end of this year, start of next year. His mission is to create premium, sort of HBO quality, short form content. And he's got $1 billion in his pocket to do it. And these guys have invested, not really because they believe in his venture, but because they want to get the production contracts. We'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do. There's real question marks to lots of people about whether this can work. There's perhaps a fundamental contradiction with short form with a venture like this. I think his base case says he's going to get 20 million subs in the first 3 years, and he's going to spend $500 million on content. But the question mark is, will people pay for it? Short form is unquestionably synonymous with being free at the moment, and will that change? So let's just move a bit more into the content market. So what is still the case is productions are still growing, but it's clearer and clearer that it's SVOD driving the volumes in the US market, and we're seeing a bit of a drop-off on basic cable. These numbers obviously sit within that, but also include the international productions of Netflix and the others, all growing strong. But it's not just the SVOD involved. These are just three. I mean, there are smaller examples with Telenet. Obviously, seems to have had quite a lot of success with their productions in their market. But then all of them have got kind of 15 plus originals kind of coming out this year. Everyone is still investing, and we like playing a game with program budgets. So this is the per hour cost of shows, some old, some new, and really we're just putting it up just to make a few points, and it's sort of the colors that are important. Everyone over the years, kind of US premium pay, so HBO, they've always sort of blown the budget a bit on a few shows. They've always had huge, big vanity projects, really big shows. Old shows like, I think, Rome and others were up there as well. And they're still kind of do it. So the HBO show coming. I think Game of Thrones is out that way now. But Morning Show, that's the Apple Jennifer Aniston show. But what's interesting, we know SVOD is driving up and hitting some big ones. The more interesting ones to look at are the ones down here. So there's the yellow ones, which are the pay TV initiatives. Everything from Sky, Foxtel, and then obviously the Liberty investment, the Rook, and the green ones. And the green ones are particularly interesting because it used to be that a show like take a show like any of these shows that are going to be on either ITV or BBC. Used to be that the terms of trade, kind of top end, £1 million you'll get that the BBC or ITV will put in, bit of tax credit, a little bit of distributor money, maybe kind of you'll get to 1.5 million. So around here, but they're all stretching up here now, either through access to finance, people like Access Industries, or either through ITV Studios' kind of ambitious efforts to kind of build more of their distribution business, which is going well and it's diversifying ITV's revenues. But they're all pushing up the prices, and I wish I was creative and a writer, because that's the business to be in right now. There's so much demand, and they're doing very, very well. I put the Rook up here. I know there's plenty of you Liberty people in the audience, because I think this is a challenge for you guys and for Liberty. Kind of, by all accounts, it's about $5 million an hour, this show. It's a co-production with Stars. Stars will have it in the US. Liberty will have it in your markets across Europe and LATAM. And Lionsgate will distribute the series everywhere else. Liberty will be in, I don't know the numbers, but Liberty will be in probably, you've got to say they're in for about 20% of that. Someone can grab me afterwards and say I'm wrong. That's a lot of money. That's $1 million an hour for a series that Liberty are going to put on their various platforms. They've got to get a return on that investment somehow. And to get a return on that investment, I think, now that you could, again, come and grab me afterwards and give me a hard time, to get a return on that investment, you've got to do things they're not really very used to doing. You've got to get behind these shows and push these shows, because if these shows are going to actually work in other markets, they need to work in Liberty markets as well. And Liberty's in kind of, it's in the UK, which is one of the biggest markets in terms of an overall kind of revenue profile of a show. But kind of the market is increasingly different. There's lots of different return on investment calculations for shows. You've got the BBC working with HBO or Amazon doing different things, Liberty, Sky. Got people like Yes in Israel doing shows with Netflix, even NBC with their Turkish studio with Netflix. All sorts of different combinations. You've got just Netflix producing things with big budgets. It's a very different market. But going back to the good old traditional day of selling shows and where they're going and what people are doing with them. Here, this is just one season. So this is a list of shows that come out of the US only in the 2016-17 season. So they've had time to have some sales cycles, be sold by the studios, and find a home. We, across these markets, which are some of the top markets we can't read, that's Australia, Canada, Spain, UK, Germany, Italy, Sweden, France, and Mexico. Across those markets, there are 162 services buying. That's a big list of potential clients, really, but there's 162 services who are still buying US shows this way. About half of them are pay TV. And if you look across the markets, there's quite a variety. So here in the UK, there's a pretty long list of people from Sky channels, UK TV will be in there, UK TV channels, even the Virgin kind of on-demand buys they've done, and Channel 4, ITV, BBC appear in there. There's a pretty wide variety, but in some markets, it's clearly a kind of pan-regional pay TV market. In other markets, kind of there's a good mixture of competition. It's helping keep prices, keep it very competitive. You have to actually look at the breakdown of who these guys are, which we'll come to in a second. But overall, here, these are seasons of shows. These are TV seasons. So there's 16, 17 TV seasons, 17 and 18. So the 18's got some way to go because there's still got some more sales cycles. But you can see SVOD is becoming increasingly important in terms of who's exhibiting those shows first in the market. And you can see what's happening elsewhere. But if you look across all those markets, you can see how that varies massively. As I said, Mexico's pretty much all a pan-regional pay TV market if you're a seller. UK's kind of actually pretty strong on pay TV. Obviously, Sky's still pretty dominant. and Australia actually, and Canada is still pretty good free TV, which is sort of the money. That's obviously year on year. The challenge has been free TV, been doing much more local productions, harder to get sales, and they're normally not always the best payer, so that's challenging for studios and independent distributors. But you look at someone like Sweden, it's becoming an almost entire kind of SVOD market. Someone described it to me the other day, was saying, I think they said, it's all right in Sweden, the SVODs soak up all our product, which I think was kind of literally a good way of saying it. And in each of these markets, kind of year on year on the 2 seasons, you can see, I think Australia is a little bit of an anomaly, actually, if you look in the data, but you can see on-demand is growing in terms of the first window. But I'm not saying there Netflix, Amazon, and those guys are necessarily dominating. There's a whole wide variety of players who are doing this on-demand premiering. It's not just the global SVOD players. It's the local ones, the Stans, Deutsche Telekom's Magenta TV product, Telecom Italia's TIM, Virgin in the UK. It's the broadcasters like Channel 4 who on their All 4 service are putting box sets exclusively or premiering them. And it's the new kind of slightly niche SVOD services like the Shudder and Sundance Now from AMC. There's a pretty wide environment. And actually also My Canal's releasing quite a lot of box sets. And I guess kind of one of the key things about today when we're talking about how channels are using it is this number, which I think we have to watch the 1891 because it's had a huge jump. But this is saying what percentage of acquired shows by the broadcasters is offered with enhanced catch-up. When I say enhanced catch-up, I mean they've either dropped it as a box set or they've had it with in-season stacking, so every episode stays on, not just the 30 days or 5 eps. And you can see the jump. I mean, pay TV got there earlier, which you'll all probably be familiar with, but free TV has been increasingly doing it. And this is having a very fundamental effect on how people can monetize content and how sales are working, which we'll come back to. And it's having a pretty fundamental effect on viewing. It's very hard. I'm sure those of you at operators will probably have access to better data than me, but it's very hard to really nail it. The measurement systems either can't or don't want to really help you a lot of the time. But what this shows you using Barb's dovetail dashboard is how many of the Killing Eve episodes, in this case, first 4 episodes, were watched before they were broadcast, because the box set was dropped on the same day as the premiere. So how many were watched before? And 37% on average were watched before broadcast. By the time we got to the 5th episode, it was over 50% was watched online, through iPlayer. With Tin Star on Sky, the first 4, the average was 52%. By the time we got to the end, I think it was 69%. That just demonstrates how none of this is edge case anymore. None of this is kind of small fry. It's a big part of the viewing economy. If you look at free TV, this includes the US market actually, but actually the figures are only a little bit higher when you look at the global average. You can see kind of the yellow is box sets. The green is the in-season stacking, so you can see how it splits out. You can see how it's been growing with free TV. And I mean, these are just a few examples, just so you understand kind of what we're talking about here. And it's everything from 2 public service broadcasters dropping shows as box sets. In this case, not even putting it on linear. In this case, following it with linear. So that's not even AVOD, that's free VOD, no advertising attached to it. Then you've got kind of free TV, Channel 4, actually ABC, just like these 2, was free VOD, no AVOD, doing AVOD, and SBS, pretty much carbon copy of Channel 4, doing AVOD as well. So wherever you go, it's happening. I say that. Maybe there's a few exceptions. It's sort of seemingly not very strong in a few markets like France and with free TV, and actually Germany as well. Pay TV, and actually free TV is caught up a bit, so it's at similar levels, but pay TV was there earlier. And here's just some examples of pay TV. It's not just Sky. It's everyone. And you take a show like Killing Eve, it's pretty hard to find anywhere where every week you'd have had to sit down and watch it and wait for it. Some of these are in-season stacking, but a lot of them are box sets. Obviously in Mexico they didn't have any catch-up actually, but everywhere else in those examples they pretty much offered it. And it's a big part of the way the broadcasters talk about it. I think I've got some examples here.
Let's go for a drive. Taking the risks.
They did, they won't do it.
Every episode available now on BBC iPlayer.
Watch the entire box set now, exclusively on all four.
To know the truth? No.
Don't confuse drama with reality, it's very dangerous.
You'll be a terrible pope. The worst.
I'm ready to wage a war without end against you.
They chose a pope they didn't know, and today they began to understand.
What do you intend to do?
Revolution.
War is the greatest economic engine ever discovered. What do you say to this proposition? Get together all the explosives we plan. This is the world they created. All we have is our right to fight back.
You're on your own. You have to go through little demon wood and east.
Wait, no, hold on. Little demon wood.
It's the wood, that's it. Not demon. Safe journey.
She's been taken to prison outside Moscow.
Can you go?
Where are you here? I'm spontaneously violent. Who will do things? Listen to the British Intelligence Service. We want to ask you some questions.
I know you're a psychopath.
You should never tell a psychopath they're a psychopath. And that's just...
Are you?
So I think was it 2016, 2017 word of the year was binge. It's become socially acceptable to use the word now, but the broadcasters are using it now. The broadcasters are using it. That's the key thing, and they're very comfortable using it, and they know that they need to serve this consumer requirement for box sets and for non-linear usage. So content first, or first as a box set, is important, but the whole thing about Windows is kind of I guess it's as maybe the simplification of it is that when people made a show, they'd have the number they need to make that show work, and in that number, 3 years in would be a number that would, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30% would be money that was coming from second window and beyond. If you had a hit, then the second window would get syndicated everywhere in the States, be bought by everybody, and that's how you'd really cash it in. And it was a numbers game for the studios. They had hit winners and losers, but if they had enough winners, then that was great. Now, what that second window number is entirely insecure. People are really questioning kind of what they can put in their projects in the second window, because if SVOD want it first, Then you've got the question of who's going to want it second and how they're going to offer it. And if broadcasters want it first, SVOD were happy with that, but now broadcasters are eroding their USP because they want box set rights, they want in-season stacking, and that value is basically increasing the value of the first window. And in all of our markets, sometimes it was slightly different. All of our markets, kind of free and pay TV, had synergies. They worked together. They could follow each other or do something different. And SVOD, when it first sort of hit the scene, it was happy to follow as well. It wanted to go first with some of its originals, but it was happy to follow. But now there's question marks over kind of what people are willing to have in front of them, and there's mixed feedback and mixed results from some of these shows and some of these experiments. If you actually break down all of those seasons, all those shows I showed you before, in terms of all of the second window, when things have been through their sales cycle, they've been sold in 2 windows, kind of still almost 70% of second windows are happening, SVODs soaking them up. And kind of the split, not roughly even between pay and free. Pay is maybe slightly less inclined to take them than free. And here, kind of this number kind of illustrates somewhat a little bit of the challenge, and kind of when the broadcasters are actually taking the second window, they've only got basic catch-up rights. The existence of the first window in SVOD means that in all probability, not in every case, the SVOD service still has the box set non-exclusively on their service. So if the broadcaster is going to offer it, he faces 2 challenges. He faces the fact that he can't probably offer any box set proposition. And secondly, if he does put the show on his platform and people like it, they might well just go and finish it on SVOD. This is a slightly complex diagram, but this kind of shows, if you break it out, kind of the second window shows, it shows what's happening to them. And this yellow bit is the interesting bit, and for those salespeople in the audience who are selling programs, this is the bit that's interesting. So of the shows that went on SVOD in the first window, where are they getting a second window? And in this case, you can see they're roughly split between free, pay, and SVOD. Overall, kind of the kind of SVOD's taking most of them, but in here, it's who's willing to follow. And if you take, the UK is a great example, and I'll use entirely anecdotal evidence that I won't back up with any numbers, but if you talk to people in the market, so channel, where are they? Riverdale. Channel 5 took it after Netflix, apparently bombed. Sorry, there's a few people in here who probably can back me up on this. You probably know the numbers. Didn't do very well for them, from what we understand. Kind of audience, somewhere you could sort of believe that. It's a very Netflixy show. Didn't do very well. But in other cases, we know shows that we've been told have done really well. I understand that Taken did quite well on 5. Maybe that's because it was following Amazon, not following Netflix. The Sinner was a good result for the BBC. Is that on here? Yeah, Sinner went for Netflix, went to BBC 4. Maybe BBC 4, very different audience. Maybe there's a kind of thing there that did it. So it's these areas around the world where we're seeing lots of different things. It just shows the variety. This is where second windows are going. And actually, if you look in Germany at the moment, RTL Crime and a few other channels are taking quite a lot of SVOD shows in the second window. I think I imagine, as with everybody, they're doing quite a lot of experimentation. They don't know which of these shows may work with them, may not work with them. France, some of the pay TV, actually, Canal, Warner TV channel, kind of, they're picking up quite a lot of second window SVOD shows. And it's a key area for development, because I think it's unquestionable that the value between the first and second window is not in any kind of equilibrium at the moment. No one really knows. There's lots of experimentation, there's lots of opportunistic behavior, and that's important money to make a project work. Here's just a few more examples. I won't dwell on them, but you can see a few interesting things happen if you break it out. Okay? And a lot of the time, it seems to be about willing to follow people from SVOD, but not if it's Netflix. So kind of Netflix here following pay TV, following SVOD actually, here with Nightfall, following pay TV, kind of some of the free TV channels and pay TV channels in Spain are trying kind of shows after SVOD, but it is important that Amazon has far less a presence in some of these markets. Canal seems to be willing to experiment, sort of following Netflix. So does Warner. But I don't know, anyone's walked around Paris recently, all you can see is Netflix adverts everywhere for all their programming. Germany, here you can see RTL. There's more RTL examples experimenting. And Italy's a bit of a mixed bag. But the one that's the great one to watch, and if any of you talk to the Nordics about it, it is what's going on here. And it seems, interestingly, kind of everyone's willing to try and follow HBO, Netflix, Amazon, Public TV, Viaplay, Seymour. They've all taken shows after HBO. Kind of SVT's experimented with after Netflix. Kind of HBO's experimented after SVT. Here they were quite innovative. SVT took it for 3 months. That's it. And after 3 months, it went on HBO. So there's massive amounts of experimentation in this market going on at the moment. And if you do talk to them, kind of again, HBO seems to have a bit more of a higher brow customer base, so that's impacting. So they're starting to see different segments within SVOD. It's not just about SVOD. But that's actually it for the slides. I mean, in terms of kind of wrap up, I think I probably raced through many things there, and there's many more to talk about. But it has been. I don't think I say this every year, but last year was incredibly rapid in terms of how the channels and how the free channels, the pay channels were innovating. The level of change was far more and far less hesitance. But there is still that challenge of balancing traditional revenues with kind of what you're doing in other areas. So if it's doing more digital AVOD, it's getting that CPM challenge over with. If you're launching streaming OTT services, kind of what's the opportunity cost, what's happening with warehousing content. I think you can see, I mean, Disney are very clear. Disney are holding back content. They're taking a hit. They know they're taking a hit, and they're going to launch that service, and they're going all guns blazing. I feel that Warner Media have been fluffing their lines. I think there's it's not just an elephant in the room. There's the big issue of their debt mounting that Wall Street kind of telling them they have to pay off. I think that's probably why they're fluffing their lines. They're talking about dynamic windowing and co-exclusivity and things that, frankly, don't really make any sense at the moment. So we'll see how they do it with their content. But the market for shows, especially for high-end shows, is still really strong when we talk to people out in the market. I think there is the fat middle that everyone's worried about. There's a lot of product in there in the middle that's going to be in a very competitive situation. And the issue around services and how people are going to interact with these services, the new kinds of aggregators, that is really going to, we feel, not come to a head, but really there's going to be a lot of fire under that this year. And that is a big battleground that's going to play out more openly, I think, this year. But that's it.
Thank you, Jack. There was a vast amount of data and insight in that. I think we have time for a few questions. If anyone is still unclear about anything at all, I think it was fairly comprehensive. If not,
you can catch me afterwards as well. There was a lot there. It was a bit fast.
There are some mics. Any questions at all? Will Harrison, you always have a question. Can we get the mic to Will? I will pick on people if no one else volunteers.
Hello, Will Harrison from Ingenious. The ability of shows to even have a second window when their first window has been with the larger SVODs, particularly Netflix, I guess. Do you see that as diminishing as those platforms increasingly just scoop up all rights in perpetuity, pay a big fat premium up front, and then your second window isn't even something that exists?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's mixed. I mean, there used to be debate about what was their shows, what wasn't. I think there's so many shows that sort of aren't even coming back till after 7-8 years, or not coming back at all, as you say. If they're not coming back at all, then there can't be a second window, really, unless somehow there's a change of heart. But after 7 or 8 years, we'll have to see. I mean, I know, but it's highly questionable that is going to play a big part in the kind of the ultimate revenue profile of a show. So it has to be underpinned by their rationale and their finances.
Thank you, Will. You've never let me down. We probably have time for yet another question. I have one. I think it's quite a good one.
There's one down here.
None of you have one. Right.
So
there we go. Sorry.
Kasia Błońska. So I have actually two questions, or actually maybe it's one question about the future trends. There are two future trends you've just mentioned. One of them is a short form content, where Quibi seems to be amassing quite a little fortune to launch their product. The other is AVOD. How sustainable, how likely they will succeed, do you think?
I'll start with the first one. Quibi, here, I'll make a bet against Hollywood and Silicon Valley royalty, who've got $1 billion in their pockets. I can't see it working. I can't see their current plan working. I can see their current plan evolving into something different, and it's hard to imagine that he won't be able to use that money and that creative power to bring some of the telcos on board in the US. So some of those wireless providers will inevitably take it and bundle it. And so he may get a lifeline that way, but I think that's the only lifeline, because I can't see him selling subscriptions. The whole plan is predicated on the fact that people are going to make him this fantastic content. They're going to get 20 to 30% uplift on the budget. That's how they're going to make their money. Plus, they get the content rights back. And he's got this plan where you get the content rights back after 2 years for the short form in long form format. And then after 7 years, you get it back in short form format. So he's basically saying you're going to be able to monetize this long form after 2 years. Now, we've seen what's happened so far with people who think that's going to happen. And if he talks about this creative kind of genius he wants to come about short form and people smart to do it. But if you're saying that, that's not me, no. If you're saying that you're going to be able to monetize it after 2 years, and we're going to be able to, this is demanded by Generation Z and whatever, how is that any different from Generation Z watching just 10 minutes of a Netflix show?
I read, Jack, that the strategy is to sell it to Verizon.
Yeah. It's to get the telcos of the lifeline.
We shall see.
Yeah.
AVOD?
AVOD, I think it's a hugely complex kind of area. I can't see, outside of the US, I have to see that the channels are going to play a bigger role in that, and they've got the leverage and they've got the power to kind of, because it all comes down, I think, which is an area maybe I'm not as strong on, and how advertising is sold. I think that's the big one of the big challenges and the big issues. And I think the channels understand how advertising is sold, have some leverage because they're selling it, and they can maybe, as they have done in this country, Channel 4 and ITV have managed to sort of get better CPMs for their kind of 3 days of catch-up, kind of by negotiating with kind of the ad buyers. And I think you're also going to see some of the niche SVOD fold into AVOD, and I think you're going to see some of the better AVOD maybe fold into other models where they're kind of bundled. But I think there's not an easy, straight answer, I don't think, for that one.
Final question. Adrian.
Yeah, talk very well about...
Adrian, would you wait for the mic? 1 second. Far away.
Adrian Hilton from A&E. You talked about a lot about scripted drama. And do you see that to be the only real battleground? What about unscripted? What about factual? How does that sort of play out?
Yeah, it's not the only one. I was very focused on scripted there, absolutely. Factual, I guess there's lots of things in play there, not least sort of your friends at Discovery's ambition to sort of own non-scripted and factual around the world. Yeah, I think it's a whole other subject. There's lots of things to be battled and fought and won over that. But we can talk to you about that later. But yeah, it's a big area as well. But yeah, we were slightly one-track mind in terms of the script on that one.
Right, I think that's it. Jack, thank you so much.
No problem.